just sort of moving on to eligibility issues. So assuming I actually, need this level of care, I need nursing home care, I'm going to qualify for that. I know that, you need to meet two tests to get Medicaid. One is an income test and the second is an asset test. Now the income test, my understanding, is relatively easy to satisfy in Washington. You don't have like a hard income limit like other states do. But if, I have $4,000 or $5,000 a month of income, can you just kind of walk me through how that would work in Washington and what I'd be required to pay for, and then when my Medicaid benefits would kick in, and also how that differs between whether I'm looking at a nursing home or like assisted living?
Yeah, it's a little different. So the first thing we're looking at with most of our clients when they come in is what is their income and how close can that get them to paying for care? Because sometimes if they're going to be paying privately for a while, then we need to include they're going to have their income hopefully available to help pay for the costs of care. And sometimes it's enough, especially if you're receiving limited in-home care. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to go through the process of applying for Medicaid if the benefit is going to be relatively small, because you're going to pay most of your income toward the cost of the care before Medicaid will start paying. So we always look at the income as a key factor. The something to keep in mind too is that the spouse's income is not counted. So it's very uneven. You may have a couple where the applicant's income is relatively low and the spouse's income is high, and that's actually kind of an easier situation for qualifying for Medicaid eligibility. What's hard is when the person with the higher income is the spouse who's also applying for Medicaid, because the rule is that you participate your income toward the cost of your care. And if your spouse is largely relying on that income, that can be really difficult. There's some exceptions where the spouse may be able to keep more of the income, but the rule is that you pay all of your income toward the cost of care in a skilled nursing facility or assisted living facility or adult family home, except $70, which you can imagine is not very much.
Can't do much of that.
Yeah, who can do anything with $70? I think it's an old-fashioned vision of long-term care where we imagine people sitting around in a nursing home and maybe their only expense in the month is getting their hair done, maybe they're getting their nails trimmed, the only expenses they have. But, in modern times, people who are receiving some long-term care services or even living in facilities have very active lives and a lot of expenses. So it's just sort of antiquated. If you are receiving COPES in Washington for home care services, they let you keep a higher amount of your income because, an acknowledgement of the costs of maintaining the home. So there are some times when you're able to keep more of that income. It's really specific to the facts of any particular application.
And so you touched on this issue of sort of having to manage this situation for not only the person going into long-term care, but also the spouse. And that leads me into this, the asset test, which I want to touch on next. And, the asset test obviously seems straightforward in that, I think for nursing home care in Washington, you can have only $2,000 of assets, but many assets either aren't counted or, or there's some planning that you can do. And ultimately this becomes a fairly complex analysis in itself. But, one of the most important things, obviously, is, preserving as many of those assets as possible for the, the spouse that isn't going into the nursing home, the community spouse. How does the asset test work if I'm going into a nursing home and I'm married?
Yeah, an easy way to think about it is the person applying for Medicaid in Washington may only have $2,000, which usually, makes people feel faint because it's such a low amount and it's hard for families to spend all the way down to $2,000 and still, have any sort of life for the spouse. However, in Washington, the spouse may also have a spousal resource limit of about it's 2020 right now. It's about $58,000 that the spouse can also have in countable resources. That can go up if the applicant's in a nursing home and applying for care in a nursing home. That limit could be even higher, but it really depends on the finances of the couple and the care that they're receiving. But in addition to the resource limit, a lot of applicants also have other resources that are not countable. So in Washington, you can have your residence where you live, or if you're single and you're getting care in a facility that you declare that you intend to return home to. You can also have a vehicle. You can have your personal property. So you don't have to go through the house and sell everything you have and try to liquidate things in order to pay for care before you can qualify. Those things are just not on the table to begin with. So in a lot of cases, the spouse has their own income that they continue to receive. They have their spousal resource amount, and they have their non-countable resources. Then anything they receive after that, after the eligibility, it's not counted. So if they then inherit money, meaning the spouse inherits money, or they are continuing to work and they have more income coming in, that doesn't count against the person who's qualified for Medicaid.
Okay. And so I wanted to actually walk through, some of the common assets that people typically have. You touched on real estate, and obviously you can exclude a significant amount of home equity here. The next asset that many people have is some type of a retirement account, whether it's an IRA or 401k or 403b. I know in some states, these also receive preferential treatment. I don't think that they do in Washington. But how do these accounts work? Is there any planning that you can do, anything you can do with these accounts, and sort of how does it work as far as the required minimum distribution coming out of them? What's your advice for people with significant retirement accounts?
Well, just generally speaking, and it's different for everyone, but generally speaking, in Washington, the retirement accounts are treated just like any other resource, and they're counted. So if you have $100,000 in an IRA, that is counted as $100,000 of countable resources. Now, the problem, as you know, is that if you take that $100,000 out of that IRA to transfer it to your spouse in order to qualify for Medicaid or to spend down on care, you're going to pay income taxes all in 1 year. Whereas the whole point of retirement savings in an account like an IRA or a 401k is to stretch out the income over time so that you're just paying income on the amount that you took out in that year. So when I have clients where the applicant has a large retirement account, such as an IRA or a 401k, then the question is, how can we get the money out of that account and into another form so they can eventually qualify for Medicaid? When someone comes in and they have a condition like early, they've just been diagnosed with early dementia, or they have ALS or multiple sclerosis or some other condition that's expected to progress over time, we start talking about how they could begin a plan to liquidate their retirement savings over time. So they can spread it over several years before they even need long-term care. And they often are working with a financial planner or a CPA or both, who's helping them time that out in the way that's most beneficial to them. But it is a mistake to think that your retirement accounts won't be counted if you need to apply for Medicaid.
Right.
For spouses, if they have a retirement account, it's treated a little differently. It's still treated as a countable resource toward their resource limit, but it's easier to roll that into, we haven't talked about this, but into an annuity that's accepted by Medicaid so that it can be kind of rolled into an annuity and then put back into their retirement account in many cases without a taxable moment occurring. This is pretty technical stuff. We always tell people to work with the financial person on this piece, but it's usually possible for the spouse's retirement account to be moved into a different savings vehicle so that they can still have their spouse qualify for Medicaid.
Well, that's great. And so, you hit on annuities. A related type of asset is life insurance. Another life insurance, you boil it down into two basic types. You have term life insurance, which I think typically isn't counted because it doesn't really have any asset value until you pass away. But then we also have like whole life insurance or universal life insurance, where it has some cash surrender value. How does life insurance work, and is there anything you can do there?
Yeah, in Washington, it is counted. So the face value, the cash out value, is counted as a countable resource. If you have a very small cash value, and a lot of times that's the case with burial funds, then it may be possible to either count it as an exempt burial fund or to use it as your countable resources. But for larger life insurance accounts or policies, sometimes it requires just that you're going, if you need to qualify for Medicaid, you're going to need to cash this out in order to spend that money down toward your care before you qualify for Medicaid. For other annuities that people may have purchased, most annuities are treated the same way. You'll need to look at what the cash out value is and either count that as part of your accountable resources or cash it out and spend it down. So there is a type of annuity that is okay with Medicaid. In fact, some people use it as a strategy to move funds that are over the resource limit into an immediate annuity or Medicaid annuity, where the spouse basically purchases, they convert a resource into an income stream that pays back typically over 5 years and in equal payments. And as that money comes back, the spouse can do with it as they wish. If it was originally in a retirement account, it may be able to go right back to the spouse's retirement account. The deal with this, though, from Medicaid's point of view, is that if the spouse passes away before the assets in the annuity have all been paid out, then Medicaid has a right of reimbursement for all of the money that they've spent for the Medicaid spouse. So it's definitely something that people would consider only if there's Medicaid on the table. It's not something that people use as a typical annuity for investment.